This is Born and Raised, a podcast from the European Social Science Genetics Network. I'm Aysu Okbay from the Department of Psychiatry in Amsterdam UMC.
And I am Rafael Arnskog from the Department of Government, Uppsala University.
So we're in Oslo. And what are you drinking, Rafa?
I'm drinking a Norwegian soda that I've never had before. It's called Solo. Well,
it's called Solo Super.
Yeah, I think the super edition is because it's sugar-free. Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of good. It's vaguely reminiscent of Fanta,
but more chemical. No.
Let me try. I would say it's a very generic orange soda. Mm-hmm. It's pretty decent. I can recommend it if anyone's ever in Oslo or anywhere else in Norway.
You mean you could recommend it to all the 5-year-olds that have your your taste buds?
All the 5-year-olds that have my refined taste buds. Yeah. Uh-huh. What are you having?
I'm having a vitamin water, specifically one with rhubarb flavor and vitamin C and D and zinc and biotin. Biotin is what?
B7.
B7.
I think that's what we learned.
I think so. Or yes. We learned nothing, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, vitamins. How do you feel like does this increase your health meter?
It increases my perception of my health meter.
Which is everything that matters.
Indeed.
Yeah. If you feel bad, you are bad.
Yeah.
Or if you feel unhealthy, then you're unhealthy.
You also feel unhealthy if you are unhealthy.
Oh my God. It had never crossed my mind. This is like two-way causation. How are we ever going to be able to study this?
It is almost a loop.
It's a feedback loop, clearly. Mm-hmm. Who did we talk to today?
We talked to Hans Fredrik Sunde about all things assortative mating.
All things assortative mating. This was extremely fascinating to me. I learned a lot by talking to Hans Fredrik today. We learn what assortative mating means, what types of problems it might cause for different types of genetic studies.
And why it is something interesting to study in and of itself, aside from being a problem in genetic analyses.
Yeah, exactly. Towards the end, we also get to know about a kind of odd fashion choice, which has led to Hans Fredrik amassing a very, very large collection of a specific type of item.
Yeah, it is a fashion choice usually not adopted by people his age.
Mm-hmm. To say the least. I hope, or we hope, that you guys will enjoy this conversation as much as we did. So without further ado, let's cut over to Hans Fredrik and see you later.
See you later.
Hans Fredrik Sunde. Mm-hmm. Welcome to Born and Raised.
Thank you.
As you may have noticed, that is my very Swedish pronunciation of your name.
Oh, what's the Norwegian?
Hans Fredrik Sunde.
So it's
it's less melody. Emphasis on each of the less melody, yeah.
Yeah. Bit more melody. In general, that's the difference between Swedish and Norwegian. Yeah. It's mainly melody.
It's not name specific.
It's not name specific.
How would you pronounce his name?
Rafael Arnskog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that works. You sound like a Norwegian pronouncing my name.
Well, that's what I am.
Exactly. Great. It's great to have you on the podcast. Would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you ended up where you're currently at?
That's a big question. So I'm currently a postdoc at the Center for Fertility and Health here in Oslo at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, where I do research into a lot of things, mainly relating to mental health, social differences, and partner similarity, which we'll get back to. Mm-hmm. And I got here through psychology, started a very interesting PhD project looking at why social differences and mental health go together across generations. And as part of that project, whenever you look at intergenerational transmission, you of course have to deal with or account for genetic similarity between parents and offspring. And whenever you apply methods like that, a very important assumption that typically come up is assortative mating, which has to be either assumed away or accounted for in some fashion. And then I just fell down that rabbit hole, and that's what I do now.
Cool. So what does assortative mating actually mean?
That's a very good point. It's let's first say what it does not mean, namely that partners are similar. So assortative mating is a specific mechanism describing one potential explanation for the phenomena that partners tend to be similar. We observe that partners, mating partners, spouses are similar for a lot of traits, especially social traits. They share the same attitudes, religion, education, and other indicators of socioeconomic position. And also, but to a lesser extent, mental health, personality. And the mental health one is kind of important. If you are depressed, your partner is more likely to be depressed too than a random individual. And then a big question is why? Is it that partners become more alike over time? Or is it that partners who are, or individuals who are similar to begin with, find each other? And it's this latter process that is called assortative mating, that people, when they are mating, they are sorting themselves into partnerships, which has a lot of very interesting consequences and leads to some nuisances when it comes to genetic research.
So assortative mating can be considered as in a single trait. Like depressed people tend to find partners that are more likely to be depressed as well. But do you also see some cross-trait similarities? Like, for example, depressed individuals find partners that are more likely to be neurotic or something like that?
Absolutely. We see this especially for traits related to education or socioeconomic position. Individuals who have high socioeconomic position have partners who are much less likely to be depressed or have anxiety disorders. We also see this across different mental health traits. So if one individual has depression, their spouse is more likely to have depression, but also anxiety, ADHD, basically all the other mental health conditions. In fact, the within trait partner correlation for mental health conditions is not that much bigger than the average across trait partner correlation. So it does not seem to be specific assortment on specific mental health traits, but rather a mishmash of assortment across traits, which further leads to problems in genetic research, but also it's not just a nuisance, which is why I find assortative mating so interesting to research, because it's a very interesting process in and of itself. And the fact that it does have genetic consequences means that we can do genetic research to study these processes.
Right.
So, for example, I think we first need to take a step back and look at what happens when people match on similarity. We can take a very big step back and become a bit philosophical and say that you are the sum of everything that has made you who you are today. You are the sum of the causes that has made you. And when you then match on who you are today, for example, let's take education as an example. If you match two partners based on having similar education, then you are simultaneously matching on everything that has caused or is associated with that education. And because we know that heritable or genetic differences are associated with education, it means that the partners also are similar genetically. It also means that one person's genetic variance will be correlated with the environments of their partner, which I think we should put a pin in and return to later. Okay, so now we have these two individuals that are similar genetically. First of all, this means that you can study genetic similarity between partners to find out whether there is assortative mating. Because unlike the other processes that could explain partner similarity, like becoming more similar over time, these processes wouldn't lead to them becoming genetically similar because their genes don't change after they have met. So if they are genetically similar, it must be because they have matched. So genetic methods are very useful in distinguishing assortative mating from other processes that can lead to a spousal similarity.
Right. Do we know much about whether assortative mating, to the extent that it's an active process and not something like, to the extent that partner similarity doesn't happen because people co-socialize, to what extent it's driven by active partner choice, and to what extent it's driven by people just having grown up in the same environment and therefore happen to match? Like if you come from the same social strata of society, then you're going to match because of that?
Oh, that's a very good question. And it's slightly, there's a nuance here, because on the one hand, you have partner similarity that could arise because of stratification. Say that the average education level was just higher in one city compared to the others, and people stayed within their same city. Then partners would have similar levels of education simply because they lived in the same city and not because they matched on similarity. And I would stress that this is not assortative mating. The stratification is another process.
Right.
But there's another nuance there, whether, because it can still be assortative mating without it being an active choice. You can just happen to end up with someone for other reasons, but a lot of randomness in our lives are not really random. For example, you may meet your spouse at the university, but then what you're really matching on is everything that made you go to university.
Right.
Which is what you were talking about, basically.
I think that was my main...
And this is an important nuance. There's some confusion in the literature because sometimes it's referred to as assortative mating. Sometimes it's referred to as an alternative explanation to assortative mating. But I'm very much in the camp of saying that this is an example of assortative mating because it is non-random matching, even though there's not an active component to it.
Because what is an active component? I mean, nobody actually goes out there with a list of personality characteristics or anything like that.
Does nobody do that, really?
Okay, maybe. Maybe now people do that. But, I mean, it's usually not that conscious, right?
I suppose that's true. Or is it? I mean, maybe you can answer that.
I don't know, but I know that this active versus passive doesn't really enter into the relevant equations. It's not really relevant.
No.
Talking about the equations, so how does assortative...
We shouldn't get technical.
I mean, in plain words, what are the implications of assortative mating on genetics? What's the genetic signature that we observe?
So there's a lot of different signatures, not really related to each other. One important signature is that when spouses are genetically similar, it means that their children will inherit similar genetic variants from both the mother and the father. And in a lot of traditional genetic research, we make a very convenient assumption that these two are independent, random, which is why you always see in papers that they assume no assortative mating. It's because once you make that assumption, you can do a lot of interesting things with genetic research. But when they are not random, it means, for example, that the genetic variants you inherited from your mother will now be correlated with the ones your brother inherited from your father, meaning that you are now more genetically similar to your brother for these traits than you otherwise would have been.
Right.
And the same applies to cousins and other relatives. Actually, this effect is larger the further out in the family tree you go. This is why family-based genetic methods are affected by assortative mating. You have a very strong assumption that the genotypic correlation between relatives are sort of
like 50, 25, 12 and a half.
Precisely. But under assortative mating, that will be inflated.
Inflated, yeah.
Because the variants you inherit from your mother and father are no longer independent. Likewise, this same process happens sort of within you. You have thousands of genetic variants, as millions, and 1,000, tens of thousands that are associated with a trait in question. Again, say education, because it's the go-to social science trait. True geneticists have fruit flies.
Yes.
Yeah, Drosophila.
Yeah. Geneticists have Drosophila. Social science geneticists, we have educational attainment.
Yes.
So we have tens of thousands of variants that are associated with educational attainment. And typically, we assume that those variants are independent of each other, unless they are very close on the genome. If they are far away or on different chromosomes, we say, oh, those are independent from each other. But what happens if the if the variant you inherit from your mother on one chromosome is now correlated with a variant you inherit from your father on another chromosome. Now those are correlated. It means that they are no longer independent. And if you try to associate one genetic variant with an outcome, it now picks up signal from that other variant, which leads to problems with more molecular-based methods, especially, as we touched upon before, if you have assortment across traits. Because now this education-associated genetic variant will be correlated with, say, depression-associated variants all over the genome.
Right.
Do you think assortative mating is a factor that increases inequality in society with respect to the traits that it affects?
That's a very interesting question. And yes, it does. That's the third genetic consequence of assortative mating. And actually, this same logic applies to environmental transmission as well, but it's more understood when it comes to genetic transmission. Because what now happens when you inherit similar genetic variants from your mother and father, if you have one genetic variant from your mother that makes you slightly more educated, that fact in and of itself means that you are likely to also inherit education increasing genes from your father, which means that people who have parents who are disposed to higher education, they typically have two parents. And then they get, double the advantages. And if you do not have that, you get nothing at all.
Yeah.
So assortative mating sort of leads to people having cake and eating it too. In Norway, we say that you have both in a bag and sack.
I've never heard
That doesn't sound
before.
great.
And this process can lead to, like, if assortative mating happens across multiple generations, then this can increase differences over time. Luckily, it won't increase forever for technical reasons. It will typically increase for a few generations and then hit a plateau. So it will stabilize and reach an equilibrium. And what we find is actually for educational-related traits, we find that this is a reasonably new phenomenon, that we have assortative mating for those genetic variants associated with education. And we see that there are still increasing differences in the population. It has not yet reached that point where it's plateauing, meaning that we see increasing genetic differences.
So we should expect essentially genetic inequalities with respect to variants associated with education to continue increasing for a while, for another few generations, essentially.
Yeah, one or two generations. All else equal, obviously.
Yeah.
So, for example, for a trait like height, have we seen the equilibrium?
Yes.
Yes.
We are matching on height. Tall people tend to have taller than average partners. It's not a very strong signal, but it's there. And we also see that they are genetically similar when it comes to genetic variants associated with heights. And we also see that this seems to have flattened out, that we have increased genetic differences for height, but it has stabilized.
Is this visible phenotypically as well over time, that there are larger phenotypical differences in height?
That's a good question. I don't really know, because there's so much other things that have happened with height. They've grown a lot taller. And,
on average, yes,
so I'm not sure.
Better nutrition, et cetera,
Yeah.
So there might also be countervailing factors, because the access to nutrition has simultaneously also been equalized. So it might not turn out to manifest as larger phenotypic differences after all.
Yeah, so if you have an increase or decrease in the variance for height, it's very difficult to say that that's because of genetic differences increasing or decreasing. And even more so for complex traits like education, where we know that what causes education changes over time and is different in different policy contexts, etc. I should say one of the things that make assortative mating a very interesting topic and a very central topic in social science genetics is that it's an example of a social process with genetic consequences. Like typically we think of the genes as always being on the right side of our equations. It's a factor that influences something we are interested in. But when it comes to assortative mating, it's sort of the flipped, where here we have a process that affects the genetic architecture in the population.
Yeah, the genetic makeup of the next generation.
Yeah, so genetics has suddenly become an outcome.
The dependent variable.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of a few rare cases where we see that type of dynamic. It's that I agree that that's one of the cases that makes it super fascinating, along with like migration and things like that. So.
I mentioned earlier that if partners are matching on similarity, they will be genetically similar, but also that one person's genes will be associated with the environmental factors of the other. So there's a very good example of this, which I think is one of the most interesting findings in the literature. There are many environmental factors associated with or influencing education, but causality can be a bit difficult to include. But one factor that is definitely having a causal effect is birth order.
Right, yes.
So firstborns tend to do better in school than secondborns. And we know for a fact that this is not due to genetic differences. You cannot do a genetic test and tell whether someone is firstborn or secondborn, meaning that any differences between them cannot be attributed to genetic differences. But the fact that firstborns do better in school, they get slightly higher education. It's not very big. It is not noticeable enough so that if you meet someone, you learn something by asking whether they are firstborn. But when you look at the population, you can tell that there's a signal there. Because they tend to have higher education, they also tend to get spouses with higher education.
Right.
But this assortment isn't specific to why that spouse have higher education, because they're matching on the sum of everything that has caused that education, including the genetic differences, which means that firstborn individuals tend to have spouses who are more genetically disposed to high education. And then they have children with also higher polygenic scores for educational attainment. Right. So here you have an environmental variable, which is not confounded by genetic differences, that affects the genetic disposition of the children of this individual, which really illustrates that assortative mating puts genetics as the outcome variable.
Yeah.
Like it really intertwines social processes, genes, and environments into a very complicated mix.
Wow. And that example is actually extremely interesting.
Yeah. Do we know when assortative mating for educational attainment has started to become strong? I mean, how long does it take for this to stabilize? Of course, it depends also on the strength of assortative mating itself. But are there any other traits that haven't reached equilibrium in terms of assortative mating that are interesting that you can mention?
So educational attainment is by far where we see the strongest signal for assortative mating. We see equally high correlations for attitudes and religious affiliation, but they don't really lend themselves to genetic research per now. So other traits, they show weaker patterns. One very interesting trait that people usually bring up when we speak about assortment for educational attainment is intelligence, which appears to be under slightly less strong assortment, which is somewhat counterintuitive. I actually expected it to be stronger, but the findings tell us otherwise.
Do you think that suggests that the sorting on educational attainment is actually more sorting on socioeconomic status?
Yeah, it appears so. It appears that whatever people are sorting on are more social background, things that are shared for siblings, for example. One potential thing is what the parents does. I know that a common question on first dates is what does your parent do? But also just like social background in general, I think is a very key variable here. And then because of gene environment correlations, you get a lot of indirect assortment on genetic differences too. But to answer your first question, it takes about 6-7 generations for this signal to plateau. And for education, we see patterns that are consistent with 3 to 4 generations of assortment, at least in Norway. This probably varies a lot. So that sort of naively tells us that it started 3 or 4 generations ago. But we know that from more historical studies that partners were similar when it came to socioeconomic position hundreds of years ago too. So what has probably happened is that what causes socioeconomic position has changed. And then in the past few generations, we have maybe seen a more that genetically influenced traits are more important, like personality, cognitive ability, etc., motivation. And now is a more important factor for whether you take education or not than before, where family background was all that mattered. And as a result, you now see assortative mating for these traits and a genetic signal that looks like it is a reasonably new thing.
Do you see any recent changes in assortative mating patterns for any traits? Like it does reflect the changes in society, clearly. Are people starting to sort or select their partners on different things now compared to a couple of generations ago? Are there any studies that look into what we can expect in terms of the genetic distributions changing for some new traits in the future? Is personality becoming more important? For example, I'm thinking, for example, in terms of like how social media has affected society. Did that, do you think, change what type of traits that people select their partners on?
That's a very good question. First of all, let's talk about personality, because when you speak to lay people, it seems that personality is, people believe that people are matching on personality. That's the most important factor when you select a partner.
Right.
But actually, we see very little similarity for personality.
Does that apply to all facets of personality, or are there any ones that stand out?
Openness to experience, you see slightly higher similarity, but it's not huge. I think the correlation is approximately 0.2, which is not that high.
It's not that high, no.
It's 0.5 for education.
Right.
So people don't seem, or partners don't seem to be that similar for personality, which goes against a bit what laymen believe. But you also hear laymen believe that opposites attract, and that's also just not.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are there any negative assortative mating?
Not that I know of. There has been some suggestions about some very specific hormones or smell, but
immune cell stuff.
Yeah, right. I haven't looked into those papers. I'm a bit skeptical,
right?
But I don't have any specific reasons for why I should be skeptical, other than just I think it smells. But as for whether social media has changed things, like now you find your partner on a dating app, and that surely has changed things. And very interestingly,
now we can actually have a list of things to select on.
People match on the ability to pick the right picture.
Precisely, or the ability to present yourself. But come to think of it, I think that was relevant before too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I actually don't think it might make that much of a difference. But interestingly, when I ask people what their intuition is, like how have things changed as a result of dating apps, you get widely different intuitions. Some people think that, this must mean that assortment is now much stronger because you now have the ability to choose much more from a larger pool of individuals, while others say that, this must mean that assortment is now much weaker because you're now no longer constrained to your
social stratum. Right.
Precisely. So I personally don't have a strong intuition about where this goes. I don't think dating apps really have made that much of a difference, at least when it comes to matching. Obviously, I think there's much stronger selection into partnerhoods because now you have the impression that the pool of available partners is that much larger, even though it's not really. So, right. But that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that is a different topic, yeah. Fascinating.
The question about how dating apps have affected assortative mating is actually a very empirical question. Is there data on dating apps? Like, has anyone looked into how much assortment we observe for people using dating apps versus those who don't in selecting their partners? It's very measurable.
It's very measurable. I'm convinced that we will see studies like that. I actually know that we will see studies like that in the future because I know that some data are being gathered on it as we speak.
Okay.
But I'm not aware of any studies that have been published already, because people need time to, they need time to date.
Yeah.
And we need to see which relationships lasts and which do not. And when it comes to the genetic consequences, I don't think we will see for a long time.
Yeah.
But there has definitely been more, like dating apps is the most common way people found their partners now. And measuring phenotypic similarity should be quite straightforward. And then we can also answer another interesting question, which is it that people are matching initially, or is it that partners who are similar just tend to last
longer?
Yeah. Which we can also answer with probably the same data.
Are there any dating apps that, I think that this was initially an idea. I think Abdel had this idea. Are there any dating apps that use polygenic scores?
I hope not.
I hope not.
I mean, they're not that good. I mean, the polygenic scores, I guess the dating apps too, but I would be very skeptical. But I assume some dating apps, like more premium ones, make you take personality tests and are trying to match people on that too. And I'm not sure what they try to do.
I guess, you can't exactly say that what you write about yourself is very accurate either. So I don't know which one is more accurate, actually.
Maybe it's metaphorically accurate.
Maybe it is.
But I think people are quite good at sort of looking through the facade.
Yeah.
When you look at someone's Tinder profile, for example. Like
I wouldn't know.
No, but I think it's the same thing with normal dating, that you pick up on tiny cues for whether their boasting is truthful or not. And this is just normal social behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, just presented in a different way, I guess.
Another thing here is, of course, the question of normativeness versus just descriptiveness. So, for example, people have similar genetic, like partners have similar genetic dispositions. It doesn't mean that it should be that way, or that we don't really know whether those partnerships are happier or better. Same thing with the personality. We know that partners aren't that similar. They're slightly similar for personality. Is it the case that similar personalities do well together? We don't really know. Or I don't know. Maybe someone does.
Yeah, maybe someone does.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I don't know. That's the one thing you learn.
Tell me about it.
That's the one thing you learn during a PhD. Is just like, less and less of more and more.
Nothing. Jon Snow.
I can say one thing. I'm not sure how to get into this, but assortative mating is often spoken about as a bias. And the same thing with genetic gene-environment correlations. It's always a nuisance, a bias, something to deal with. But I think it's a very interesting process in and of itself. And if you just call it bias, you may lose some interesting findings. The same thing with gene-environment correlations. We have passive gene-environment correlations, where genetic effects are confounded by environmental effects, or conversely, environmental effects are confounded by genetic effects. But the gene-environment correlation is actually a very interesting phenomenon in and of itself, because it means that people who have favorable genetic variants tend to also have favorable environments. So just as
their partners.
Sorry?
In the form of their partners in this case.
When it comes to assortative mating, it's this. But if you only look at gene-environment correlations without assortment, you also have this same Matthew effect, where those who have shall have even more.
Yeah.
And then assortative mating comes on top of that and just increases things even further. This is a co-occurrence, I think, is a very interesting and important explanation in and of itself, not just some confounding factor that we need to deal with. We should probably look at that as an outcome too.
Agreed. Definitely agree. Yeah. If you could only bring one thing to a deserted island, what would it be?
That's a very easy question. You would, of course, bring an emergency locator beacon.
That is the one sensible answer that I've heard.
I will give you another answer, because, of course, what you're really asking about is there something that's important to me?
Not necessarily,
no.
but go ahead.
I think I would bring pen and paper.
Oh, that's the second time that we're hearing
Second time we
this
hear
answer,
that, yeah.
actually.
Yeah,
What would you do with the pen and paper?
extend my brain.
Extend your brain?
Yeah, my memory.
Embodied cognition, or whatever
Precisely.
they call it.
My brain isn't good enough to hold things in my mind
no
for
one's
long.
brain is.
So I need some help.
Yeah.
So this is just resigning to the fact that you're not going to be rescued, I guess.
Yeah, and to the technicalities of the question that I cannot bring like multiple things.
Yeah. An emergency locator beacon is like the most straightforward, rational answer you could ever have expected, which, I mean, I would have expected that sooner, given that
me too.
the people that we talk to are scientists. but
instead,
pen and paper is a very good approximation of like the parallel type of scientist answer, I think.
Yeah.
it is better than a laptop.
Yeah, I mean, that would be useless. But I mean, there probably, if you are stuck on a remote island, there would be a lot of problem solving to be done. And problem solving is easier if you can just write things down.
That is true, yeah.
Do you read fiction?
Not very much, but I've just finished listening again to probably my favorite fiction book, which is The Lord of the Rings, which is brilliantly read by Andy Serkis.
I didn't know that he did
So during
reading of it.
During lockdown, he live streamed reading the entire Hobbit in one sitting.
Oh.
It took him 11 hours, and then a few years
That must
later.
have been exhausting.
Yes.
Does he do like the Smeagol voice in his characteristic? Yeah.
And all the other voices. He's an amazing voice actor. And it's also an amazing book.
So is that what you would like if you would recommend one fiction book?
Yeah.
That Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, read by Andy Serkis.
Read by Andy Serkis.
Read it yourself if you want to, but it's a very good audiobook.
Is there any particular weird, quirky, fun fact about yourself that people might not know that you were willing to share?
Well, some people probably know this quite well, but when I was an undergrad, I used to wear a bow tie every day when I went to university. So I
How did that go for you? Did you?
Well, obviously, fine.
Debatable.
Well, I had stopped by the time I met my wife, so. But so I have 52 bow ties.
50, one for each week of the year?
That's
that?
sort of an accident.
That's sort of an accident. It's an interesting accident, though.
Did this start with university, or did you also used to do this before?
No, this started a few years into university. I don't know. I was just intrigued by like tying bow ties. That seems like a skill I should learn.
After you got out of the bullying zone of.
Is it a lot more difficult tying a bow tie than a regular tie?
So that's what I thought, and that's why I sort of fell into this.
Right.
And then it just got out of hand. But actually, it's not. It's just like tying your shoelace, but it's the angles needs to be
aligned.
aligned.
Yeah.
But it's not very difficult.
Interesting.
Well, it's easy for me to say. I've had a lot of practice.
I've worn a bow tie once. It was at the conferment ceremony for my PhD when you're required to wear tails. I've never worn a bow tie other than that. But, however, I do frequently wear a bolo tie. Do you know a bolo tie?
No.
It's the cowboy version where you'll have, it's like a leather strap and it's a little, some sort of little jewel that you tighten up here.
Frequently, you say?
Well, not frequent. Well, occasionally, a couple of times per year, like formal dinners and stuff like that. I might.
Can we do one conference with you?
Yes.
Wearing this? Okay.
Yeah. For sure. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us, and I'm sure the listeners of Born and Raised will have had a great time listening as well. Hans Fredrik Sunde, do you have any final words?
No.
That's good. That's acceptable.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.